Hello, I'm Hamp Overton, and this is my friend and colleague Paul Catalanato. This is 100 Scariest, where we're looking for the scariest short films streaming online. In this episode, we're talking about 2022's Portrait of God, directed by Dylan Clark. Paul found this film, and Dylan Clark has been making films for about 8 years. And although this film is not his most recent, it is his most popular per YouTube views at 7.1 million views. This short horror film is about a young religious woman preparing to talk about a painting called Portrait of God. And you can find this film at Dylan Clark's YouTube and Vimeo pages. Paul, what did you think about this film?
Honestly, I think I really enjoyed this one. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
overstay its welcome. It's short to the point. It manages to get one good scare in. If a student came to me with this movie, I would be very pleased to think that this originated in one of my classrooms. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I also have a lot of thoughts about it. It's weird. It's very short, but I have a lot of thoughts about what his intention was, what
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about. I mean, it opens up a lot of discussion just with its very short runtime, which I think is very impressive for a film of that size to do and of that budget.
Yeah, I thought what might be interesting to you, I know that you're Catholic, and this seems to be honing in on Catholicism to a certain degree. And I thought that might maybe pique your interest as to why you want to choose this film.
You know what's funny is I don't think that's the Christian God in that painting. It doesn't say which God. It says portrait of God, but I don't think that's God in that painting.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be like God in an eldritch sense, like like cosmic horror sense. But I don't think that's God as in, the ones that people are worshiping on Sunday mornings in the Baptist, Catholics, Protestants, whatever, denomination you are. I don't think that's that God. I think that's a very different thing in that portrait, and which to me makes it all the more frightening.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that because that is mentioned by another reviewer. But he has a theory that the creature in the film feeds on faith, which he said was very frightening to him as a Christian, but that it was only a theory of his and he wasn't sure if that was the intention of the filmmaker. I, on the other hand, because the filmmaker chose to put the statement at the beginning of the film, which is, "No man shall see me and live," from Exodus, I thought that he was clearly referencing the Bible and that who she saw was God. God wasn't bad or evil or anything. That it's just that again, that statement is based on the fact that when God tells Moses this, he apparently means that mortals cannot look directly at God, as the sight of him is so immense that it would be fatal to them. And when I learned that, I said, "Oh, this kind of does make sense." She has seen God in it. It comes across as maybe like as a horror creature, but she's so enraptured by him that it can be dangerous, detrimental, deadly to her, which is what the biblical saying alludes to right there. So I did interpret this as God, that she actually saw God.
But you know what? Any God, right? Like any God would be too much. I know he's referencing an Exodus quote, but any God, I believe even the Greek gods in their mortal form you could witness them, but in their spiritual form they even believed you couldn't look at them. Or even an angel, anything godly or otherworldly that big, we wouldn't be able to withstand its visage, right? We couldn't look at it.
So
So,
you still believe that this is not God, though, in this
no,
particular film?
that's just my interpretation. But he could have very well. We talked about this just last week, right? When we talked about the previous movie. He may have had the intention of that being God, but the way I interpret it, it just doesn't line up. And I think my Catholic upbringing affects that. Just like the other gentleman, when he talks about it, it affects that. And your background lets you see it differently. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too sure what his true intention would be. I think maybe he was thinking, if I had to guess, I think he thought what looking at something like this would be like, right? And I think that's where he started and just built from that.
Hmm.
But I mean, I
That's
could be
interesting. Yeah.
wrong.
No, I think it's great that a movie. He chose a good subject, but he's a great filmmaker, and I think that's why we can sit here and have this discussion about it. If it wasn't a good film, I think it would be pretty obvious what was going on. But this one allows it open to be open to interpretation. Did you watch his making of video here?
I
And that
didn't.
he does all the different aspects. He writes and he also directs. He does his editing. He's like a jack of all trades. It's interesting. A lot of these young filmmakers, we find that to be true quite a bit. It reminds me of David Sandberg's film, who we also viewed here, that he had all these skill sets that he brought. And one skill set that he did have was being able to do special effects, especially in post production, those types of effects. And if you look at this guy's, at Dylan's series of films, which are all available on YouTube and also on his Vimeo channel, you can see that he progressively starts to learn about and use special effects. And what's nice about his special effects is that there's special effects used to enhance the image rather than take over the image. To me, that's the best way to use a special effects when you're not even aware that it's been used. In this film, he used it when she's clutching the cross in her hands and her hands bleeding. He actually dripped some of the blood on her shirt using special effects. And it's such a small, subtle thing to do, but it really does help because it shows that it's still progressing and actually happening. And so I like his use of special effects and the fact that he does it in a very reserved way. He holds back. He doesn't want to go bananas with it. And sometimes when people learn how to do these things, whether it's filmmaking or anything like that, you get excited about something and you let it get away from you. It's just like when you, especially when you first cut a film's almost always too long, and it's almost always bad too. And he says the same thing in one of his interviews. He said his first cut was 10 minutes, and he said, uh, "This film's terrible. It's never going to be any good." But you plug at it and you stay at it and you keep working at it, and it comes out to be a great film like this. And so, but again, that happens. I hope for any young filmmakers out there. I hope you understand that that will happen to most of the films you make. A film is something that you have to work at, and it's like the first time you sculpt something, you have to keep working at it and working at it and working at it and find that image in the stone. And it's the same thing with filmmaking. And so he discovers the same thing, but your persistence is very important to have in order to find that gem that's in all of that rough material you've got.
No, I agree. And I'm glad you said that he was restrained in this movie. I found that admirable. I mean, you could look at big budget Hollywood movies and they can't find restraint in this
Yes,
movie.
yes.
You know, and
Yeah, I think sometimes big budget Hollywood movies are trying to impress their producers, the people that a classic example that I sometimes quote in some of the classes I teach. If you go back to the very first Rambo movie, First Blood, do you ever see that one right there?
Mhm.
And there's a scene where Rambo escapes from the sheriff's men by going into a cave, and the cinematographer on that said that they want to light it so that Rambo was only lit by his torch. And it was a fake cave. They built it on a set. And so Sylvester Stallone has this torch and he's climbing through these narrow spaces and they're dripping water down and stuff like that. And he's only lit by his torch. And they said the producer came to the set and said, "What's going on? You can't see the cave." And like, "Well, yeah, this is what it looks like, if you're actually there with the torch." And the producer said, "Yeah, but I paid for that entire cave. I want to see that entire cave." And so the producer's perspective was completely contrary to what the filmmakers, the director and the cinematographer wanted to do. They want to make a great, gritty, realistic film, which it was. And the producer said, "I paid for all that. I want to see it all up on the screen." And I think that can be one of the death nails of films is that you get someone in there whose perspective or objective of the film is not supporting the primary purpose, which is to tell a great story.
No, absolutely. And like you said, but to be so young and to be so reserved, that's
Mm-hmm.
and this movie succeeds, I think, largely because it's so reserved. Even the big jump scare at the end is very reserved. You don't see it. You don't, it's just grabs her on the wrist. That's it.
Right.
So frightening. It's so, and you can almost even argue that you can see it coming. but it's still so well done that it still has all the effect that it needs to have.
Not to deviate from this film, but if you watch his other films, you can see that this is his pattern. He's not a jump scare type of person. And I read that in some of the comments on YouTube also that they like that he doesn't jump scare because sometimes it's a gimmick, and it's great that he does that and still accomplishes and makes a very frightening film at the same time.
It's something that I'm seeing quite a bit, even in my work, and people who comment on my work, is that jump scares are kind of seen as cheap now. It's like you see the audience almost they're definitely not looking for it. They're wanting to be more mentally and I guess that's it, mentally scared. They want something that's going to stick with them and make them think, not something that's going to jolt them.
Well,
You know,
something dreadful that
yeah,
slowly
exactly.
builds up. It's the jump scare kind of gives you this flash of adrenaline, and I find it uncomfortable. I find it really bothersome. I'd rather have something like this, which is it lets you go along for the ride rather than being oh, I got to be ready for the next jump scared, and you're just like this the whole time. And I find those movies can be kind of stressful rather than a fun scary trip.
Now, I love it, to be honest with you. I love the jump scares.
Do you?
That's part of it. It's like that's like a roller coaster ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to say horror films come in two packages, maybe there's roller coaster rides and then the museum ride. And this one kind of more fits into like the museum ride. It's wanting something to stick with you. And if you really want to debate it, a movie like Hereditary, I would argue, is also scary like that. It's more
Mm-hmm.
dreadful, stays with
Right.
and I would argue those movies are more frightening than the ones that just make you jump. Jumping's fun. It's fun. It's just something, it got me to feel something in that moment. But and it's also easier. It's cheaper. It's easier to make somebody jump, right?
That's the thing. I think is kind of lazy, as I mentioned. You can have some good jump scares now and then, but I think it is kind of lazy to do that. Where it's just like, gotcha. It's like,
But if the jump scares push the story across, those are the ones that are the
you're right. No, you're absolutely right. I shouldn't be, you know, whole cloth in saying jump scares are not a viable and useful tool. They just seem to have gotten cheapened because it's an easy way, like you said, to get a scare out of somebody.
and to get somebody to just feel like they're getting their money's worth. But like I said, this movie here, the jump scares, I mean, that I would say that is one jump scare at the end of this, but the dread that this movie brings, and it's not the film itself, I would say. It's the question that it makes you ask is the dread.
Mm-hmm.
Think that's what makes this one so popular. Because if you look at his other films, we can sit here and debate whether his newest one is better than his older one. Storytime, I think, is his latest one. I thought that one's very slick and also very good, but I don't think it's as good as this one. And the reason is Portrait of God, I'll think about later. I'll
Mm-hmm.
think about the other one later, even though I thought it was a better directed and better produced movie
Yeah.
and I thought it had and I thought it had a cool gimmick. But
Yep.
the other movie reaches me in, my faith is part of who I am. It's going to stay with me and make me. I'm going to feel that long after watching it.
Sure.
Whereas the other
Sure.
one, I will
Sure.
not.
Yeah. The other one, you can kind of see an evolution also of his progress with these films. His most recent one, I found much more violent,
Hmm.
and uh, with the others, although he does portray death and things like that, he often stops before the violence. There's one that he did. What is it called? It takes place. Is it called Sand Dune? It's one that takes place on a beach. Do you remember that one? And it's about a woman that finds uh, a buried body on a beach and then gets attacked herself. And he leaves the film before the violence occurs. And that seems to be sort of his, or in some of his other films, the violence occurs off screen and we just see the results of the violence. Then in his most recent film, as I mentioned, we actually see the violence. And so I'm not sure if he left the violence off screen because that was his choice as a filmmaker, or if it's easier to show it off screen. I mean, have it occur off screen when you don't have a large budget to, have stunt people, have props, have CGI in post, all these things that can help your violence look more realistic on screen. Um,
But
so again, I'm
restraint
not
is
sure.
kind of style. I'm sorry to interrupt, but restraint
Mhm.
seems to be his style. I just wanted to bring it back to what you were talking about earlier.
Right.
Restraint seems to be something he's very comfortable with as a directing style.
Yeah. 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 That and no dialogue. This was an unusual one in his films, and that someone actually talks. Know, um, in all his other films, the lead characters rarely talk. There might be a voiceover. In his latest one, it's a podcast, but the lead person doesn't speak. And in this one, she does speak, and she actually reads cards, which is interesting. So she's not even speaking, I would say, traditional dialogue. She's actually reading something from a card. Um, and so that seems to be a favorite of his, and he also likes to do it with having a singular character. He's a big plus on that. You could refer to the creature as a second character in this film. He has a very simple stylistic approach to filmmaking, and with this minimalistic dialogue, if any at all, and usually a single person that we follow in an area by themselves where they're trapped and they can't get out. That seems to be a pattern of his. And I think a very successful pattern. He's found something and he's very good at it. I'm glad that he is able to exploit it.
And also, too, before we move on to the other aspects of the film, I want to say this is also a great example of cosmic horror, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, I actually learned about cosmic horror from that other YouTube video and learned that cosmic horror's origins are from which we were discussing earlier from H.P. Lovecraft. And just in case anyone's not familiar, like I was with cosmic horror, it's the sense that ordinary life is a thin shell over a reality that is so alien and abstract in comparison that merely contemplating it would damage the sanity of the ordinary person. And I thought that definition was perfect for this film. I almost feel like Dylan read that definition and said, I know how to make this movie now because it fits it so well right there. And that's from the book Icons of Horror and the Supernatural, an encyclopedia of our worst nightmares.
I agree. And, I find, too, that every generation has a fear, right? You know, during World War II, people were scared of nuclear war, and then we had those monsters to come out of that. You know,
After World War II, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
after World War II, the atomic age. I feel like right now people are afraid of the unknown. And I think that chalks with what we see in the news, right? Climate change, what's going on with the economy, what's going on with, with whatever. That's kind of COVID-19. I think this generation has just been bombarded with these unknowables
Mm-hmm.
is the unknown. And I think that is coming out in what they're scared of. And I think we might see a renaissance of cosmic horror, like these monsters that we just can't know. I definitely think we see a lot of this stuff online. This kind of monster or
Mm-hmm.
situation online, I think is very popular.
Well, another thing that I found familiar with this film is he addresses a very simple thing that anyone can do at home. Like we all can watch this video and then pause it on the image of the portrait of God and do we see it? And that reminded me of movies like Candyman, how the premise behind that was you look in the mirror and say Candyman 3 times and it summons Candyman. And think about The Ring, how you watch a videotape. And so these are things that I think it targets the audience, which is probably teenagers to your 20 somethings. It's a fun way to dare yourself to do something like this. And I know I'm kind of getting off of the more serious reasons as to why this movie was made and into the more um, a reason as to why I think it might be popular because of that fun thing that you can, oh, let's actually do this and dare your friends to do it with you, that type of thing, like some of these other films we just talked about.
Well, you're not just watching, you're participating, right?
Exactly. You're participating. You're learning something from it. Think about Blair Witch and things like that. You can participate in that too, because it's just a bunch of kids out in the woods with a camera. And so it's something that's viable or doable within your world. And so you have your friends over and you watch this scary movie, and then um you dare them to do something similar, you know.
And think about how hard that is in general. You 90 minutes and you can't get somebody to participate, where they're just taking it in, where there's just feeding them, right? You know,
Hmm.
to actually get them to be engaged in what you're making or showing. I mean, that's another level, and we're doing it here in just in a very short amount of time. Well, what do you
Yeah.
think about the directing and editing, Hamp? Just to change the subject on you, was there anything that bumped for you watching this?
I think the only thing that jumped out at me, and I had to laugh when that other reviewer was critiquing it, was the when she first starts to see the creature on the screen and gets freaked out. She doesn't turn the projector off. She she raises the screen. So I'm still going to be there. So why did she turn the projector off? Yeah, uh, and maybe there's a reason behind that. I don't know. Um,
We did. You wouldn't get
but
the great scare, right? Where it comes up, it's still there.
yeah, I'd love to see it grab onto the edge of the projector and go up or something. So I thought it worked very well. I think, as I mentioned, we were talking about this earlier, that he's got a great eye and just edited it very well together. He's very generous in giving credit to his collaborators and things like that. So I'm not sure if he's got a certain cinematography goes to, or with the production design, etc. But I think he's probably the genesis of a lot of this stuff. One of the greatest cuts I thought was when she runs out of the screening facility and shuts the door, and it goes like that to the dark room of emptiness and things like that. And as I mentioned earlier, he knows how to use special effects without calling attention to them. When she's small in the room, again, if you watch the making of video of this, he shows that he just took a standard shot of her and then shrunk her down and filled this big black void. So it looked like a large empty space. And it's such a simple thing to do. And he's really, really good at finding these little tweaks and little nuances that really put a polish on his films that makes them stand head and shoulders above other short films and filmmakers.
Absolutely. I really like that shot too. That was really
Mm-hmm.
cool. Because it looks like a soundstage, that's what you would assume it was, a soundstage, like a big dark soundstage that she ran into, not just some small room that he cropped out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, I got to give credit to the performance of this young woman because she's in the follow-up film he does, and she does a terrific job in here also, as the person who is has to start from making just a report to seeing something frightening to suddenly she becomes, I guess, mesmerized or hypnotized by this creature that comes out of the unknown. And again, the filmmaker does a great job of, I feel like I'm being kind of a broken record here, but it, just cutting to the phone. He communicates so much visually, which to me is the hallmark of a great filmmaker. He doesn't have a bunch of exposition, which is great for theater and things like that. And some movies, succeed with that. But he's a very visual director, and the cross around her neck. We see that, and then we don't see it later on, but we know it's there because he showed it to us. She's playing with it, right? I mean, that's a great tool. How do we communicate this to the audience early so that we can reference it later on? Oh, have her play with it. And that's great. And then later on, she is gone, and but we know it's there. Okay. And then the phone, she practices the speech that she's going to give or the presentation, and she times it. And so now the audience knows, oh, she's timing herself. And so when he goes back to it later on, we already are familiar with this information, and we see that, oh wow, it's now 3 hours that she's been standing there. So he's really, really good telling stories visually. And that is looking at his earlier films, you can kind of see the genesis of that sort of stuff, but he's really polished it and has become very, very good at doing that.
The actress's name is Sydney Brumfield, and she's been in a couple of things. I know two of his shorts, and it looks like a few other shorts by other people.
Hmm.
Oh, cool. It's cool. I mean, and you see that, two careers that benefit from each other.
So I kind of noticed a pattern with his films. His actors or characters are almost always young. I think there's only one that was someone that was might be in their 30s, and that was about the woman that had a child that died, or a newborn or an infant or something like that. His movies are always horror, supernatural, very little dialogue. It's almost always one person, sometimes two. Okay. It's always one location that could be the woods or it's usually a room or something like that. And then he also has an increasing use of CGI. So there's a clear pattern that he has. And it's just interesting to see that he doesn't deviate from this pattern. And they're always also they're these these horror supernatural ones. He really loves that genre. So which is great. He seems to be good at it.
I think musically too. I think his music and sound design are pretty good too.
His
I think
music is
storytelling.
great. He gives a lot of credit to the guy that writes his score. I wish I had his name right here, and that person deserves a lot of credit. It he found a great collaborator with his sound design. He may do his own sound design. I'm sorry, with the person that does the score, the music for the film. It really enhances it.
Gavin
Seeing
Watt.
watching films. Pardon?
Gavin Watt.
What was that? Gavin
Gavin
Watt, yeah.
Watt.
Shout out to him. We watch films as they're being made by our students, and watching a movie without sound design and music is rough. And because music helps you learn so much. So we encourage students to, or actually everyone does, and he talks about doing this too, is put in a temp track in there. And he actually, in some of his making of videos, tells you what movie he has borrowed temp music tracks from, which then inform his composer, Gavin, as to what he's looking for. And that's what professional filmmakers do all the time. And it's a great tip for anyone that is out there making their own movies is go ahead and borrow them from the soundtracks of other movies, your favorite movies.
Well, that's also why we tell people watch movies. That's why I get filmmakers every now and again who says, "Yeah, I don't really watch movies. Why are you making movies if you don't watch movies?"
I'm baffled by that too. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I mean, there's lots of things to filmmaking. I'm kind of getting off on the sidebar here. You can make corporate videos, you can make commercials, you can do sports, you can do animation. And sometimes I know you and we focus mainly on your single camera narrative, but there's lots of other ways to. We're using cameras right now. We're making a YouTube video, and so there's lots of ways to create content using a camera these days. And so if some people find a different way of doing it, but when they take a narrative class like what we teach, you assume that they're interested in making narrative films. Yeah, it is confusing when they
We but we tell them to watch movies because people in our business watch movies. And that's how
Mhm.
you communicate with each other. Like when you're making a product, you look at another product and then it helps inform decisions about your product.
Right. And I think Dylan is a good example of that because of him referencing other movies for soundtracks. He seems to be a huge fan of horror films like you are, Paul. And so he has this body of knowledge to reference.
Mm.
That's one thing. If you ever watch anyone talk about Quentin Tarantino, he's just has a huge body of knowledge of movies, all sorts of movies. And you listen to Martin Scorsese talk, and he references movies all the time. And so he has a really big body of knowledge. So when you're on set, or before you even get to set, he'll talk to maybe his scene designer or maybe his cinematographer and say, "Hey, I was interested when I watched this movie. I'd like to do something like that." Now you have a common reference right there. If you're not watching movies, where are you getting your inspiration visually? Mhm.
No, I agree. This is now our fourth time doing this. And I'm sure you and I are going to talk about this many more times, but is online the new home for horror films? Or is online or streaming like YouTube, is this the new way we're getting independent movies? You know, we used to have those indie sections in Blockbuster. That doesn't really exist anymore. Where are we getting those truly independents? And I'm not talking about like Sundance independents. I'm talking about people who are not connected at the business at all and not making a movie for $1 million, but making movies for bubblegum money.
Mhm.
Is YouTube that place now? Is Vimeo that place now? You
Well,
know, it,
how about Amazon? Amazon, I've there's stuff on there. I've seen low budget material on Amazon also. Mhm.
Tubi. Tubi, right? It's
Tubi,
really
right?
low budget.
Hmm.
But like, is that the new way? Because like movies are not, according to them, producers, movies are not as profitable as they used to be, right? They're where is the future of our business headed? Is it where we're making these things on our own and making a living off of our own streams? Is it is there going to be a separation between what we're seeing in the studios and then what Dylan Clark is doing here? Dylan doing this 20 years ago, he would be directing feature lengths by now. 30 years ago, right? But now we all do it. We all make movies. We're all fighting for the same eyeballs. But yet, and he may never make a feature film connected to a studio. I'm not saying he won't, but I'm saying it's possible, even doing this great work. You see what I mean? It's like,
Hmm.
is this the future of our business right here? I don't know if we can answer that in one short podcast, but like, I mean, I see this movie and where are we going? And I think it's exciting and scary all at the same time.
Well, that's the big question, Paul. But it evolves. I remember in the '90s that was the boom of the independents. The studio system was beginning. Well, the studio system collapsed in the '60s when we had the first wave of independence, and then another collapse came in the '90s when you had Steven Soderbergh and you had Robert Rodriguez and you had all these young filmmakers making independent films for not much money and going outside the studio system because they had festivals to go to, and also cable TV was a big thing then, and then you had DVDs. That all changed everything. Going from VHS to DVDs, where you could get on a DVD and then someone could watch it by themselves. They didn't need distribution through. But the old guard is still there. I don't feel that they're completely gone. Look at all your big blockbuster movies are going to be Disney, they're going to be Amazon, they're going to be Sony, they're going to be Warner Brothers, all that kind of stuff. And these movies make a pile of money. And what was interesting is Dylan actually went and did an internship with Ghost House Pictures. He mentions this in an interview in his school paper. His school paper interviewed him about the Ithacan. He when this movie reached a million, they did an interview with him and talked about it. And he actually did an internship with Ghost Pictures, and that is the production company of Sam Raimi and Robert Tappert, who you might know from the Evil Dead movies, and then Sam Raimi did the first. I guess it's the first three Spider-Man movies, the ones with Tobey Maguire in them. Um, and so he might be going in that direction because if you go and look at Ghost Pictures, they have a lot of horror films that they produce, and that might be why he got his foot in the door there, because it's a genre that he is interested in and is producing material for. So hopefully, he is uh, being funded by them for his next and hopefully his first feature film. That's what I'm hoping. I'm just saying maybe that's happening right now. So
Yeah. It's just interesting though, like what happens to us at this point? I say us, I'm still making movies. I just wonder because y- you see more movies like this, and I'll turn more. I keep looking because I have this video like right across my
sure,
screen
right,
here,
right,
speaking to it. Because like you wonder like what is the future? Because I get asked this a lot by students. Well, how do I make a living do this? How do I turn this short film
right.
on YouTube to a living? And I felt like that answer was easier almost 2 years ago. And it's gotten harder.
Well, I give a couple of different answers. If you want to be a director, um, you have to make movies, right? You can't wait until you get an assignment in class to make movies, which I thought was interesting. Also, when reading his interview, most of these films on his YouTube channel, Dylan's YouTube channel, weren't class projects. I think only one of them was a class project, which is the one about the woman that loses her child. So he is self motivated already.
Hmm.
If you think that someone's going to come to you and say, "Hey, I want you to make a movie," that's not going to happen. What you have to do is be making movies and have someone discover you and say, "Oh, you are someone that can make a movie, and I'm going to give you some money to make a movie, right? And you just have to keep on beating at it. Um, maybe this short doesn't work. Maybe that one doesn't work. Maybe this one gets a few views. Maybe this one finally breaks through. Okay, and if you can. The interesting thing about making movies today is this: it's anyone can make one. The tools are there. You know, for $10,000, that may sound like a lot of money for someone that is just starting out in college or something like that. But for $10,000, you can buy the software, you can buy a computer, and probably get a camera, um, or you can rent a camera from your school, and then you just need to get your friends to work with you, and you can make a feature. 90 minutes or 85 minutes, whatever it might be. Okay. So it's on you to do it. If you're waiting for someone to come to you and say, hey, you're doing great. Here's some money. it's,
Yes.
this is not likely to happen. And when I look at Dylan here, I see a lot with Sandberg in the same way, in that both of them were making shorts. Both of them learned to shoot. Both of them learned to edit. Both of them became very good at special effects, so they could raise their film above the fray that's down here, and add a certain level of production value that gets the attention. Okay,
Hmm.
and that's important. And if you can do all those things, um, then you have a better shot. I mean, you have to be good at what you're doing. Also, you got to be a good writer. You got to be a good director. You got to be a good editor. But if you can find a cadre of people that can do this, it's doable today. Think about back in the day, like when Spike Lee, broke free and he went to film school. His first feature film he shot on 16 millimeter film. That just the film stock alone and development probably cost him 10 or 15,000. Okay, that's just the film stock. Now he's got to get uh, the camera. He's got to get the audio stuff. He's got to get it after it's transferred. He now has to have it cut together, and then he has to work. And it's so expensive to shoot on film. That was a real barrier for talented filmmakers to try and break through. And that barrier is no longer there. It's gone. The financial barrier. Now it's just creativity and your go get itness, your gumption, that type of thing.
You can make a movie with your cell phone.
You
You
can.
can make a feature length with your cell phone.
Who just won an Academy Award there for Best Picture? Remember that guy?
The
You know the movie
Anora,
he Adora? Yep. Do you know what movie he made 2 movies ago?
what's that?
Tangerine. Shot,
Tangerine.
shot with it, shot with an iPhone. He went from shooting Tangerine with an iPhone to win an Academy Award for Best Picture and Best Director.
I mean, it when you say it like that, it makes it like it's so easy.
It's that easy.
It's that easy. I mean, and it's not, it's the easiest thing to say and the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was not easy at all. I'm reading a book right now, Steven Soderbergh's book, and he's being interviewed by the guy that or he's having a conversation with. I'm not sure who's interviewing who. A director that made the Beatles movie Help, and I think this guy's passed since then. This book was written in the late '90s. But Steven Soderbergh talks about how he got a white patch in his beard in the mid '90s because of all the stress he was under making a movie. So even Steven Soderbergh, who has gone on to win Academy Award for Aaron Brockovich and huge success with the Ocean's 11 films and things like that, the stress can be overwhelming, and I think that can cause a lot of people to step out of the business because it's so intense and so incredibly stressful because so much is on the line and so much is expected of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I are going to have this conversation many more times over the course of this YouTube series, podcast, or whatever you want to call it. I guess let me wrap it up with three comments from his YouTube page. I think I'm gonna pick the first few. One was, damn man, this was so well done. I am so happy to have been a tiny part of it, and I am sending this to everyone I know. Creepy, understated, and powerful. So that was somebody that was involved in the movie. And let's see, Zan140. One of the best tactics in horror movies is when the monster is barely visible, just visible enough to tell you that it exists and it's closer than you think. Love what you did here. And then one more, the fact that she's clutching that cross so hard that her fingers are drawing blood is so eerie, and I love it. That's three comments that pretty much touch on everything that we talked about.
Yeah, I love the point about not seeing the monster. That's one of the crucial things about horror films is our minds create a more horrible monster than anything that can be shown on screen. And if you keep it hidden like that, we will fill in the gaps and make it worse. So that's a great tool for all horror filmmakers.
Which is also how cinema works in general.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right. So, next episode, we're going to talk about the short Mama Agnes. Well, Hamp, I think that about wraps it for Portrait of God. This was another great one, I think, in the books.
Yeah, great find.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I look forward to watching Mama Agnes. And for those of you watching this, like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, this is the 100 Scariest. Peace out.